You don't blend in anymore, not by accident, not by chance, but by destiny. Once you were a face in the crowd, another voice in the hum of the city. Now the streets themselves lean closer when your name is breathed. There's a hush that falls in corners where gossip once flowed freely. There's a quick, involuntary quiet when someone remembers you were there. They don't simply notice you with idle curiosity. They notice you with a kind of reverent alarm. Your presence has become a signal that something true is about to surface, and that possibility unsettles those who have grown comfortable in shadow. They fear you because you are no longer an accessory to their narratives. You are the interruption that exposes the seams. Where once polished lies were accepted as background noise, your footsteps now set the tone, a cadence that makes secrecy feel precarious. Conversations that once drifted easily over wrongdoing now catch, stutter, and recalibrate the instant your name is mentioned. Powerful men and women who depended on polite indifference feel the floor shift beneath them. Their practiced calm cracks into a tremor when your silhouette intersects their plans. They find themselves counting words, measuring smiles, searching for exits because the simple knowledge that you exist in the same world as they do makes their carefully constructed illusions tremble. You are the truth they tried to bury, the ember they stomped on that kept reigniting. You walked into places that tolerated quiet corruption and dared the air to change. You spoke when silence was currency and watched that currency melt. Your courage is not loud or performative. It is a steady, stubborn light that refuses to be smothered. It is the kind of conviction that makes liars uncomfortable not because you scream at them, but because you stand in such clarity that their stories no longer fit around you. They sense, deep down, that your clarity threatens more than their reputations. So when you walk, feel it, not pride, but the weight of responsibility that comes with being the instrument of exposure. Feel the air tilt. Notice the conversations that falter in your wake. Know that their fear is not merely of you, but of the light you carry, a light that reveals what has been carefully hidden. Stand in it. Let it refine you, not harden you. Let humble you, not silence you. For the purpose that moves through you is larger than any one encounter, broader than any one room, and bolder than the schemes that tried to contain it. If you recognize this signal in your own life, the hush, the shifted posture, the way your name sets people talking and cringing in the same breath, then you know the fire rising in you is real. You are not mistaken. You are not alone. Comment 777 if you know that fire, if you feel heaven's heat stoking your courage, and if you are ready to let the truth you carry keep burning until every hidden thing is shown. Chosen ones, danger is in the air because your very existence has flipped the script. What used to be ordinary now reads like a proclamation. Your arrival rearranges the scene and forces people to account for what they once ignored. You become the unsilencable voice, not because you shout, but because your words land with a gravity that demands response. The firebrand truth-teller is not a role you put on like armor. It is the effect of a life leveled toward honesty so consistently that falsehoods simply cannot coexist in your orbit. Your presence cracks open polished lies the way sunlight cracks a pane of ice, slowly, inevitably, and then with a cascade of shattering that leaves no safe place for pretense. When divine frequency fuses with unshakable conviction, the world feels it, not as a rumor, but as a seismic rearrangement of priorities. There's a tone change in rooms you enter, a recalibration of politeness into accountability. People sense it first as a chill, then as that particular stillness that comes when everyone knows something sacred is being witnessed. The fusion is both quiet and volcanic. Quiet because it is rooted in a still resolve that will not be trampled. Volcanic because it erupts into consequence wherever lies have been lodged. This is not performance. It is destiny meeting discipline, an inner tuning that aligns your heartbeat with a frequency so pure that deception cannot harmonize with it. You didn't choose this path for spectacle, but the consequence is unmistakable. Silence becomes a treacherous currency around you. Those who trafficked in half-truths and practice the art of plausible denial find their markets collapsing. Their scripts, the rehearsed smiles, the careful evasions, the cultivated amnesia, begin to fall apart under the weight of your steady insistence on clarity. And clarity, once introduced, has a social momentum of its own. It compels witnesses to speak, emboldens the timid to name wrongs, and gives ordinary people a vocabulary to refuse complicity. Your voice works like a lever. Small energy applied at the right pivot produces a movement that lifts entire rooms out of complacency. There's a moral geography to what you do. You stand at the boundary between what has been allowed and what must be exposed. Where systems have smoothed over offenses with euphemisms and rituals, your presence introduces an ethical friction that produces heat, uncomfortable, refining heat. It is that heat which forces confessions, which makes the crooked paths visible, which unmasks the smiling hands that held knives. You do not need to pursue every offender. Sometimes merely refusing to be accomplice is enough to set the mechanism of revelation in motion. The ripple begins from your refusal to look away and grows into a tide that reaches into boardrooms, classrooms, alleys, and inboxes. Your power is paradoxically humble. It is born of quiet practices, prayer, reflection, stubborn fidelity to truth in small, unseen moments that, over time, assemble into an unshakable core. That core is what people perceive before they even hear your words. A posture of integrity, an unhurried gaze, a refusal to flatter when truth must be named. And when that inner core meets external injustice, it does not flinch. It speaks, it acts, it insists on repair. The result is not merely the exposure of individual lies, but the destabilizing of the safety structures that protected those lies. Systems that once operated on the assumption of silence now operate on the assumption of scrutiny, and that change is irreversible. Feel the gravity of this calling without letting it become a burden that crushes your joy. There's the holiness to the work of unmasking, but there is also a tenderness. You are revealing not to humiliate, but to heal, not to punish, but to make room for restoration. The truth you carry has the capacity to set captives free, to forgive when repentance is real, and to demand justice where it is owed. That is why the world reacts so strongly, because your purpose threatens to reorder more than reputations. It threatens to restore dignity where there has been exploitation and to re-anchor communities in the light of what is right. So stand in the strange, sacred tension of being feared and beloved, feared by those who profit from lies and beloved by those who hunger for truth. Keep your voice unbent by applause and uncorrupted by anger. Let the fusion of divine frequency and conviction refine the way you speak, precise, courageous, compassionate, so that every name you call into the light has the chance to be restored rather than merely condemned. This is the season your life was preparing you for. not for glory's sake, but for the sake of a world that needs the clarifying, courageous, uncompromising presence you were made to be. Once you spoke, everything in the room rearranged itself around that sound. It was as if air had memory, and when your voice entered, it remembered a truth it had been taught to forget. Conversations that had been moving like clockwork, easy, polite, rehearsed, suddenly fractured. Words hovered, then fell away like leaves when the wind changes. People who had been mid-sentence found their mouths still, not because they chose silence, but because your presence introduced a gravity that made pretense feel suddenly untenable. Eyes darted, smiles thinned, the practiced choreography of evasion stumbled. Even the most fluent liars discovered awkward pauses where they had never been before, as if the language of falsehood itself had lost its footing in the space you occupied. Powerful men and women, those accustomed to controlling the tone and tempo of a room, felt that control slip the instant your name crossed their lips. The ease they carried like armor, a relaxed posture, a ready joke, a patronizing nod, flickered into something sharper, a small, involuntary tightening of the jaw, a recalculation behind the eyes. They began to measure their words by microsecond and syllable, testing phrases in their heads for safe passage. Their confidences, once delivered with casual certainty, became guarded offerings, their stories smoothed into smaller, safer versions. In private huddles, there were hurried looks, a quick scan for exits, an almost comic fumbling for scripts that would hold. That nervousness is not merely fear of exposure. It is the recognition that the rules they relied upon, silence, obfuscation, complicity, are being rewritten in the very room. When your shadow falls near their secrets, those secrets feel suddenly exposed to daylight. A secret that has been fed by convenience and protected by courtesy cannot withstand the heat of unflinching scrutiny. Your proximity acts like a lantern. You do not have to demand confession or raise a finger. Simply being there brings a clarity that forces hidden things into view. People become clumsier with their stories. They contradict themselves, reveal small inconsistencies, and betray the gaps between what they say and what they do. It is as though your presence introduces an invisible ledger, and every quiet omission is written down for anyone willing to read. The more they try to smooth the surface, the more the cracks show, and their attempts to control the narrative only draw attention to the places they hoped would remain unseen. You are no longer a person to them in the way you once were. You have become a condition, an unavoidable fact that alters the calculus of behavior around you. Where once you might have been another name on a list, another attendee in the room, you're now a variable that changes outcomes. Meetings are planned with your possible arrival in mind. Conversations are steered away from topics that would make you uncomfortable. Decisions that once sailed through on momentum now stall because your presence raises questions no one wants to answer. That shift strips them of their complacency. They can no longer assume that silence will suffice or that polite indifference will protect them. Your existence introduces an ethical pressure that compels answers, forces accountability, and destabilizes the illusion that wrongdoing can be smoothed over by convention. You have become, in their estimation, a living disruption, not because you seek to be disruptive for spectacle, but because truth by its nature is a breaker of false equilibrium. Disruption here is not chaos for chaos's sake. It is the hard but necessary reordering that follows when corruption or indifference is no longer tolerated. Your disruption is surgical. It targets the rot and leaves room for repair. That makes you dangerous to those who have built comfortable lives on the backs of silence and compromise. They feel you as a threat because your very posture refuses to validate their arrangements. Your insistence on clarity pulls the thread that unravels the cloak they hide beneath. A holy threat. That is the term they might attach to you when they cannot categorize your power in human terms. It is a phrase born of fear and a grudging kind of respect. Fear because they sense their practices will be exposed. Respect because they intuit that the force opposing them is not merely personal indignation, but something rooted in deeper moral authority. This is why they react so strongly. It is why influential people who once moved with confident strides now count steps and rehearse miles. To them you are a reckoning personified, a reminder that there are standards beyond convenience, and that a life aligned to a higher truth will not be satisfied with the compromises that made their comfort possible. Yet this status, feared, scrutinized, misunderstood, is not the end of your story but a signpost of significance. It is the outward mark of an inward consistency that refuses convenience when justice calls, and the external pressure you generate is the engine that begins to turn systems toward accountability. Where you walk, quiet courage awakens in others. Where you stand, secrets begin to seek shelter elsewhere because the environment for them has become inhospitable. Remember, then, that the trembling you elicit from the guilty is matched by the hope you inspire in the righteous. Your presence disarms the habit of hiding and replaces it with the possibility of confession, healing, and reform. So keep speaking, keep standing, and let your voice be the quiet earthquake that shifts the ground beneath entrenched injustice. Not for vengeance, but for the restoration that only truth can make possible. What unsettles thrones and rattles crowns is not your rage, but the calm weight of your courage. It is not shouting that shakes authority. It is the quiet echo of your refusal to bow. Your courage is not a spark that flickers and fades. It is a wildfire disguised as a whisper. Once released, it spreads beyond your sight, igniting hearts you will never meet, stirring souls you will never touch with your hands, but who will feel the reverberation of your boldness in their spirit. Your voice has become contagious. It travels like wind through locked doors, like thunder rolling across distant mountains. It seeps into boardrooms and palaces, into kitchens and street corners, and everywhere it lands, it awakens the brave. Those who had settled for silence suddenly find their tongues loosened. Those who had crouched in fear suddenly stand tall. And those who had given up hope feel fire in their bones again. But the same sound that awakens the brave alarms the comfortable. Your presence is no longer neutral. It is polarizing. It divides light from shadow, truth from deception, courage from cowardice. Some will cling to you as if you were a lifeline. Others will recoil as if your very existence exposes their rot. This is the nature of real conviction. It comforts the wounded, but terrifies the oppressor. When truth walks hand in hand with conviction, deception trembles. Lies do not merely hide. They begin to collapse under the weight of reality they cannot withstand. Like glass struck by a resonant note, falsehoods crack when your frequency passes by. This is why rooms fall silent when you speak. This is why even those who hold power avert their eyes when you enter. Deep within, they know, authority borrowed from deceit cannot stand in the presence of a soul anchored in truth. And so you stand, not loud, not violent, not even seeking attention, but unshakable. And in your unshakable stance, you've become a revolution in human form. The room doesn't simply notice you. It tightens as if the very walls lean closer to witness what will happen next. Air grows heavy, conversations stagger, and laughter dries on lips mid-sentence. Why? Because your presence pulls masks off faces. Not with accusation, not with a raised finger, but with the silent gravity of authenticity. Pretenders feel their disguises melt under the heat of your truth. Smiles turn brittle. Words stumble over themselves. Eyes dart nervously, searching for a corner to hide in. You don't expose people by force. You expose them by being. By standing there in your unshaken alignment, their shadows twitch and spill out into the open. Their contradictions betray them. Their carefully rehearsed personas unravel. They reveal what they meant to bury, and they do it not because you demanded it, but because the light you carry makes concealment impossible. You have become a walking lie detector. Your presence carries a resonance that falseness cannot withstand. Like a clear bell ringing in a crowded marketplace, every false note trembles and breaks in your atmosphere. Lies trip over their own tongues when you walk by. Deception collapses in on itself, unable to keep balance under the weight of your clarity. And here's the mystery. You didn't train for this. You didn't plot for this. You didn't even ask for this. It is the byproduct of alignment. The result of living in truth so deeply that anything false cannot coexist with you. People think you're reading their minds, but you're not. You're simply shining with a frequency that reveals what was always there. That is why rooms feel uncomfortable. That is why conversations shift. That is why certain people retreat when you arrive. It is not you they fear, it is the unveiling that comes with you. For light never negotiates with darkness. It simply enters, and the shadows scatter. You're not a spy, not a judge, not even an interrogator. You are a mirror. And those who love truth will find rest in your reflection. It is the sound of everyday voices realizing they, too, can stand. They, too, can speak. They, too, can shake the cages built around them. And it all traces back to that one moment when you decided not to bow, not to blend in, not to remain silent. This is the dangerous beauty of truth in action. It cannot be ignored. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. Once heard, it cannot be unheard. Once lived, it cannot be forgotten. And so your name travels, not as gossip, not as scandal, but as testimony. Testimony that one act of bravery has the power to awaken a movement. Now, people who never met you speak of you as if they have. They draw strength from your example without ever shaking your hand. They find fire in your story without ever seeing your face. And those who once held power are learning the oldest lesson of all. That truth, once spoken, multiplies faster than fear can silence. You have become more than a person. You have become a living narrative, a tale of defiance, a spark of awakening, a reminder that courage is not only possible, it is unstoppable. The righteous will flourish like a palm tree, not because storms avoid them, but because storms reveal them. The palm bends, but it does not break. Winds howl, rains beat down, yet its roots go deeper and its posture remains unbroken. Such is the life of the one rooted in truth. Adversity does not wither them, it strengthens them. Trials do not diminish them, they fortify them. The righteous grow tall where others wither, because their nourishment comes from a source that cannot be cut off. The path of the righteous is not static, not dim, not fading. No, it shines brighter and brighter as dawn becomes morning and morning becomes full day. Each step they take becomes a testimony. Each decision, a lamp to those watching. And even when shadows gather, their path glows with a light that cannot be hidden. They are the evidence that righteousness is not weakness, but power in its purest form. And those who lead many to righteousness, those who speak truth when silence would be safer, those who guide the lost when it would be easier to look away, they will shine like stars forever. Stars that outlast empires. Stars that remain visible long after kings have fallen and monuments have crumbled. Stars that generations look to for direction in the darkest nights. Such is the reward of those who live not for themselves, but as beacons for others. For when the Lord gives wisdom, it is not fragile knowledge, not a suggestion among many. It is a force that topples deception, no matter how high it builds itself. It is a hammer against the fortress of lies. It is a wind that scatters the smoke of confusion. Human cunning may twist and manipulate, but divine wisdom cuts through with precision, leaving no room for distortion. This wisdom is not the product of textbooks or human debate. It is revelation. It comes like rain on thirsty ground, like fire in a dark cave, like a sword in the hand of the fearless. And once released, it cannot be contained. It exposes, it dismantles, it rebuilds. What deception thought was secure crumbles in its path. What arrogance believed untouchable bows before it. The righteous, armed with such wisdom, become more than individuals. They become walking revelations. They step into rooms and atmospheres shift. They speak a word and chains break. They carry themselves with a peace that enrages the wicked, because nothing can counterfeit the authority of light. And so it is written, the righteous flourish, their path shines, their legacy burns like stars in the heavens, and their wisdom, born of God, does what human power never could. It destroys deception at the root. You don't always need to speak to reveal truth. Sometimes the greatest revelation comes not through words, but through silence. Your stillness is not emptiness. It is thunder restrained, lightning waiting to strike. Power held in quiet authority. In a world addicted to noise, your refusal to play along becomes the loudest sound in the room. When others expect reaction, you give them pause. When they anticipate performance, you give them presence. And that pause, that sacred gap between their expectation and your response, becomes a mirror. It forces them to face themselves in your silence. They reveal more than they ever intended. Their justifications stumble. Their polished words unravel. Their contradictions spill out because your stillness refuses to cover for them. It is a paradox. You win battles without raising your voice. You confront systems without swinging a sword. You disarm deception not by force, but by letting it collapse under its own weight. Where corruption depends on endless chatter, on performance, on layers of distraction, your quiet refusal strips the stage bare. Suddenly, the emperor has no clothes. Suddenly, the mask is paper thin. Suddenly, everyone sees what was never supposed to be seen. The pause you hold is not weakness. It is warfare. It is strategy older than time, for even heaven itself reminds us, be still and know that I am God. In that stillness lies authority. In that stillness lies the unshakable center. When you refuse to bow, refuse to nod, refuse to play along with the script written for you, systems tremble. The choreography breaks. The illusion falters. Where institutions once hid behind politeness, your presence turns on the light. Where cultures wrapped corruption in smiles and handshakes, your unmoving gaze cuts through the pretense. Where manipulation thrived on compliance, your pause becomes rebellion. You are not swept into their rhythm. You make them dance to yours. And so truth is revealed, not with shouting, not with slogans, not even with debate, but with light. The light you carry does what arguments cannot. It exposes. It illuminates. It makes hidden things plain. But those who live by deception will find their own faces unbearable to look at when you are near. This is the quiet power you carry, to shake the room not with noise, but with presence, to dismantle lies not with argument, but with light, to turn every gathering into a place of revelation, simply because you walked in coffee shops and dimly lit corners. Your name is whispered like a rumor too dangerous to speak aloud, yet too powerful to contain. In university hallways, where ideas and identities are shaped, your story circulates, carried not by megaphones, but by hushed voices leaning close, as if sharing a forbidden truth. The weight of your presence has entered their daily language. Even strangers who have never met you repeat your name as if it carries a charge, a spark, a frequency they can feel in their bones. And what is it they say? They speak of the supervisors who once ruled with fear, now shifting uneasily in their seats when you appear. They recall the professors who wrapped their corruption in polished words, only to find themselves stripped bare by one question, one truth, one light you carried into the room. They tell of boardrooms that once decided fates with unchecked arrogance, suddenly disrupted because someone dared to stand without trembling. Your single act of bravery did not remain a single act. It multiplied. It became seed in the soil of countless witnesses. What you thought was one bold moment became a ripple across waters too vast to measure. It spread into conversations you will never hear, into hearts you will never meet, into revolutions you will never personally lead, because courage is contagious, and once released, it cannot be recalled. Now there is a chorus rising. A chorus not organized by institutions, not controlled by leaders, not even advertised by headlines. But those who live by deception will find their own faces unbearable to look at when you are near. This is the quiet power you carry, to shake the room not with noise, but with presence, to dismantle lies not with argument, but with light, to turn every gathering into a place of revelation. Simply because you walked in coffee shops and dimly lit corners. Your name is whispered like a rumor too dangerous to speak aloud, yet too powerful to contain. In university hallways, where ideas and identities are shaped, your story circulates, carried not by megaphones, but by hushed voices leaning close, as if sharing a forbidden truth. The weight of your presence has entered their daily language. Even strangers who have never met you repeat your name as if it carries a charge, a spark, a frequency they can feel in their bones. And what is it they say? They speak of the supervisors who once ruled with fear, now shifting uneasily in their seats when you appear. They recall the professors who wrapped their corruption in polished words, only to find themselves stripped bare by one question, one truth, one light you carried into the room. They tell of boardrooms that once decided fates with unchecked arrogance, suddenly disrupted because someone dared to stand without trembling. Your single act of bravery did not remain a single act. It multiplied. It became seed in the soil of countless witnesses. What you thought was one bold moment became a ripple across waters too vast to measure. It spread into conversations you will never hear, into hearts you will never meet, into revolutions you will never personally lead, because courage is contagious, and once released, it cannot be recalled. Now there is a chorus rising. A chorus not organized by institutions, not controlled by leaders, not even advertised by headlines. You are proof that sometimes silence carries more weight than 1,000 speeches. This is why rooms grow tense when you enter. Why conversations fracture when you remain quiet. Why powerful men and women lose their composure when you do nothing at all. Because your stillness is not passive. It is prophetic. It is presence that demands alignment. It is a holy pause that forces masks to fall, forces truth to surface, forces darkness to face the one thing it cannot stand against: light. There will always be Judas types. Those who kiss your cheek with a smile while sharpening daggers behind your back. They know the language of loyalty, but their hearts are filled with schemes. They clap the loudest in public, but curse your name in secret. They call you friend while plotting your fall. They study your steps not to walk with you, but to trip you when the moment seems right. And yet, you terrify them. Why? Because they cannot comprehend how you expose them without ever lifting a weapon. You don't need to fight on their terms. You don't need to smear their names or lower yourself to their tactics. You only need to stand where the light touches you and their shadows betray them. Their masks slip, not because you rip them away, but because the brightness of your authenticity makes deception impossible to maintain. That is why they plot. That is why they whisper. That is why they build networks of lies in back rooms and closed-door meetings. Because your presence alone dismantles what they carefully constructed in darkness. The schemes they spent years designing unravel in seconds when exposed to the radiance of truth. Judas feared Christ not because of swords or armies, but because Christ carried a light that pierced through every pretense. So it is with you. You are feared because you need no blade, no army, no fortress. You carry something far more dangerous to deceit: transparency, integrity, a divine fire that burns away the chaff and leaves only what is real. They try to smear your name, but in doing so, they reveal their own envy. They try to silence your voice, but in their frantic attempts, the truth grows louder, spreading beyond their control. What was meant to bury you becomes the very soil from which your influence multiplies. And here is the irony. The very ones who scheme against you become unwilling heralds of your truth. Their attacks only draw attention to the light you carry. Their betrayals only confirm your discernment. Their attempts to silence you are fuel for the fire that makes your testimony impossible to ignore. Like Judas, who thought 30 pieces of silver would end a movement, their plots only accelerate what heaven has already ordained. Understand this. Their fear of you is not rooted in who you are, but in what you reveal about them. They cannot stand the mirror you hold up, the reflection of truth that strips away the masks they hide behind. You don't even need to speak. Their nervous glances, their trembling words, their sudden defensiveness reveal everything. They cannot silence you because silence itself testifies on your behalf. So let them plot. Let them whisper. Let them weave their nets of betrayal. For it is written, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." The trap they dig will catch their own feet. The lie they spread will circle back to their own house. And your name, though dragged through mud, will rise cleaner, brighter, stronger, because truth does not need defending. It only needs light. And you, chosen one, are that light that a person standing alone can be attacked. They can be outnumbered, cornered, and pressed on every side. The lone voice of truth can feel drowned out in a sea of lies. But the moment another rises beside them, the balance shifts. Two standing back to back can no longer be so easily broken. Where one could fall under the weight of assault, two can brace, defend, and strike forward. And when a third steps into alignment, a triple braided cord is formed, one that no blade can sever. You, chosen one, have not only stood alone in dark rooms, but you have inspired others to stand with you. Your courage multiplied itself. Your truth became a spark that lit torches in the hands of others. What began as a solitary stand has grown into a coalition, a network of truth seekers, each carrying the flame, each refusing to bow to deception. Your authority is no longer only yours. It is multiplied every time another person decides to take their stand beside you. Understand this. Unity is heaven's strategy. Darkness thrives in division. Corruption feeds en silence. Lies gain power when people believe they are isolated. But when even two voices harmonize in truth, deception trembles. When 3, 5, or 10 gather in boldness, the very foundations of oppression begin to shake. That is why Jesus said, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am with them." Because heaven knows the exponential power of agreement. Think of it. Armies crumble not because of numbers, but because of conviction. Systems topple not because of weapons, but because people stand shoulder to shoulder refusing to bow. Every revolution, every awakening, every spiritual movement begins with a coalition of the courageous, those who decide their voices are louder together than the lies arrayed against them. This is why your authority has grown. Not because you shouted louder, not because you fought harder, but because your stand gave others permission to rise. And when they rose, your power multiplied. Now, when your name is mentioned, it's not just you they fear. It's the ripple effect of every soul emboldened by your example. The coalition you've built is not bound by geography or status. It stretches across coffee shops, classrooms, boardrooms, even into places you've never walked. People whisper your story, repeat your courage, and use your stand as fuel for their own. A lone flame can be blown out, but 1,000 flames united become a wildfire that no storm can extinguish. This is what you've created, a wildfire of truth. A movement bound together like that triple braided cord. Resilient, unbreakable, eternal. So, stand tall in this truth. Your authority is no longer yours alone. It belongs to every truth seeker linked to your courage. And as you continue to walk in divine purpose, more will rise. More will join, and the chain will only grow stronger. For the coalition of the righteous is not easily broken. And you, chosen one, are its cornerstone. Stand firm. Do not let the winds of doubt or the whispers of compromise bend your spine. Stay bold, for the world has enough echoes, but it is starving for voices that will not waver. Let divine purpose anchor your courage. Not ego, not ambition, not the applause of men, but purpose that flows from heaven itself. When storms rise, it is purpose that keeps you rooted. When betrayal comes, it is purpose that steadies your hands. When fear presses in, it is purpose that whispers, "Do not be moved." Refuse the comfort that demands silence when truth is the cost. Many will choose the easy road, the one paved with acceptance, approval, and applause. but you, chosen one, cannot. For you know that comfort bought at the price of truth is nothing more than bondage wrapped in velvet chains. What good is a crown if it was purchased by bowing to lies? What good is peace if it requires you to betray your own soul? Stand bold enough to lose the world if it means keeping your integrity. Lean into the wisdom of the Lord, not the shallow wisdom of men, not the fleeting trends of culture, but wisdom that has been spoken since the foundation of the world. The wisdom that cries out in the streets, that says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." Proverbs 9, verse 10. Let that wisdom shape your words so they pierce through confusion and bring clarity. And when a third steps into alignment, a triple braided cord is formed, one that no blade can sever. You, chosen one, have not only stood alone in dark rooms, but you have inspired others to stand with you. Your courage multiplied itself. Your truth became a spark that lit torches in the hands of others. What began as a solitary stand has grown into a coalition, a network of truth seekers, each carrying the flame, each refusing to bow to deception. Your authority is no longer only yours. It is multiplied every time another person decides to take their stand beside you. Understand this. Unity is heaven's strategy. Darkness thrives in division. Corruption feeds en silence. Lies gain power when people believe they are isolated. But when even two voices harmonize in truth, deception trembles. When 3, 5, or 10 gather in boldness, the very foundations of oppression begin to shake. That is why Jesus said, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am with them." Because heaven knows the exponential power of agreement. Think of it. Armies crumble not because of numbers, but because of conviction. Systems topple not because of weapons, but because people stand shoulder to shoulder refusing to bow. Every revolution, every awakening, every spiritual movement begins with a coalition of the courageous, those who decide their voices are louder together than the lies arrayed against them. This is why your authority has grown. Not because you shouted louder, not because you fought harder, but because your stand gave others permission to rise. And when they rose, your power multiplied. Now, when your name is mentioned, it's not just you they fear. It's the ripple effect of every soul emboldened by your example. The coalition you've built is not bound by geography or status. It stretches across coffee shops, classrooms, boardrooms, even into places you've never walked. People whisper your story, repeat your courage, and use your stand as fuel for their own.